The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay. We'll have to, can we trim that off? Hey, this is Sandy. Welcome, you guys. This is our quarterly Q&A call. Yay! We're very excited that you're here. Very excited those of you who are listening to the recording, and those who have asked questions and sent them in ahead of time. Yay! Thank you so much for doing that. This is, what day is it? It's May 31st. I can hardly believe that. Project SmartSprout. And we are here to answer some questions. I know that we do a lot of training. You got the Facebook group, which is a great opportunity to ask questions, but I know that sometimes it's just, it's a little more fun. It's a little more personable. It's a little more meaningful if you have the chance to actually hop on a session and ask a question for a coach. So we're going to start with introductions. So you guys all know me. And then the other coaches that are with me today are Leah Holt, one of our grant gurus here at Get Fully Funded, and Whitney Bishop, our mindset coach extraordinaire. You guys want to pop in and say hello?
Sure thing.
Hi, everybody.
Whitney. Hi. Glad to be here. Excited to answer your questions.
Awesome. So I'm going to start with, let's see. Yeah, we'll start with one in the Facebook group that got asked from Monique. Monique Wells, who has an organization that's based in Houston. She actually lives in Paris, which I think is just amazing. And Monique said she couldn't make the Q&A today, but posting her question here. Thank you, Monique, for doing that. Have you ever seen or put a nonprofit on hiatus? If so, for how long? And I did ask a clarifying question, meaning asking if she was meaning putting the programs on pause for a while, and she said yes. I have not seen anybody necessarily put a whole nonprofit on pause. Have either of you seen that?
Yes, actually, this is Whitney.
Yeah, tell us.
So the organization that I was once executive director of actually received a death blow from a funding standpoint, and it was we had to make some decisions about how to move forward, and the board made the decision to put it on hold, right? So in other words, to regroup, recenter, figure out how to replace the funding, but to put it on hold. And how they did that was essentially they looked at the bylaws to see, all right, what are the rules for us to keep our 501c3, and how do we do that? And ultimately, they mostly did it because they couldn't make a decision, which was a big issue. And so they put it on hold to delay the decision making and maintained their 501c3. I think it was for about a year. And then it just sort of dissolved, right? Because they hadn't been deliberate or decisive or really made any decisions. But you can put it on hold, but the way they chose to do that was just indicative of their inability to be decisive. And so my question would be, what are the reasons for, walk me through your thinking about how that's one of the options or one of the scenarios. What does that look like? And maybe from there come up with some different questions or different ways of looking at it. But I do think it can be done. I've seen it done, but where there's a lack of decisiveness or decision making, ultimately it will probably just dissolve as a result of that.
That's good stuff. Thank you for sharing that. Leah, do you have anything to add? Have you seen anything like that?
I've never seen anything like that, but I have a follow-up question, though, for Whitney. So my question is then, in that instance, how did you handle the communications with that? So communications between the organization and the general public, or communications between the organization and the funder, or any funders or any donors?
Yeah, so we didn't really have a lot of donors. It was all mostly funded. As an asset building coalition, there were a few key partners. The biggest moving part of what we did was tax preparation, and we were outside of tax season. So the financial education programs that we ran were for specific organizations. So it was easy enough to be able to communicate with those key stakeholders to let them know that we were no longer going to be providing financial education in this year, right? And that there would be a decision made later. And ultimately, I handled that communication with the partners and just gave them other resources, essentially other community resources, other ideas, problem solved with them to try to figure out how to fill that gap. And then the rest of it was sort of left to the board to have conversations with some of the other stakeholders or founders.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that.
Interesting. Yeah, it was a good question about communication. Yeah, I had a couple of thoughts as well, Monique, when I first saw that, and I'm gonna do a follow up in the Facebook group and tag Greg McRae. One of the concerns that I have, and I love that Whitney also asked this with her group, and that is, what do you have to do to maintain your 501c3? Because I think that's pretty important. You know, like any kind of organization you have, doesn't matter if it's a business or a nonprofit or something, we've all got stuff we have to deal with. There's still reports that are due to the government or the IRS or whomever, and I think it's really important that we are very clear about what are those legalities that we have to tend to so that we don't lose the 501c3. So I'm going to tag Greg and ask him, because he may know some random little piece of something that none of the rest of us know, and that's why he's one of our coaches, because he does know those things. One of the things that flew through my head when I first saw that question was similar to Whitney. Why is that the only option? And if it is, and I know that in SmartSprout we have a lot of founders, and I know that many people who have founded a nonprofit could be working a job and doing the nonprofit on the side, or life happens, there may be something else going on, and I'm thinking, if it is, and I don't know because I haven't asked Monique this, if it is that it's life is pulling Monique away, where's the board? Where are the other people who are invested in this organization? Can somebody else not run with the ball for a little while and give you a break if that's what you need, or to help overcome obstacles? So I'm just wondering if there are other people around who can help so that it can continue on, maybe even at a reduced level. So maybe not delivering services to the extent that you have been in the past, or that you were trying to, maybe just backpedal a little bit. It's very interesting. I wish Monique was here so we could have more conversation to find out what exactly is going on. So the bottom line, Monique, is yes, we have seen this, and it is possible to do it.
Yeah, and we're available. So for follow-up questions or anything that you might have, I'm happy to have a conversation with you about that.
Yeah, awesome. Cool. All right, let me go find, and for those of you who are coming in, welcome. We're glad you're here. We are starting with some questions that have been asked by email and in the Facebook group. And if you got questions, feel free to type those in. All right, so this is from Anya. And she says, I love this. I made a huge error with my initial board of 2. One is fantastic. I know, right? So right off the bat, like, oh man, y'all, you need more than 2 people on your board. And I get it. I get that you want to put something in place so that you can maintain control, because the truth is, the minute you put that nonprofit together and you get a board of 3 or 4, they can vote you out. Yes, they can. That's how this works. Now, they probably won't, but that can be done. You need more than 2 people on your board. Okay, so back to Anya's question. One is fantastic. I found out via social media the other one had a really icky temper and fights with people online in a way that could damage my brand new organization. Yuck. I need to know how to approach it. She said she's chatted with a few people, and the consensus, along with the sinking feeling she got and continues to have since finding this out, is that that person needs to leave the board. It's good we figured it out now before we have even announced who the board is. I feel stupid for not knowing this information ahead of time, but live and learn. I'm happy to have at least caught this before we had our first board meeting. So what do we say? How do we handle this? How do we replace her? That's interesting. Whitney, I'm definitely going to want to hear what you have to say about that. And actually, I'll let you go first.
Okay. So I always start with questions. And so I would begin to ask yourself the question, what would it look like if it worked? So if this conversation with this board member went just exactly the way I would like it to go, just sort of play that out, write it out, think it through, talk it through with somebody, and get your language right, but don't make it an option for her to say no to your invitation to step off the board, right? So I think, part of me would want to be really clear about what's expected of board members, and is there some of that you can lean on? But if it's new, it just could be as simple as saying, I know this is a little bit awkward, but as we look at the composition of our board and who we really need in this opening stage, we've made some decisions about the board, and I'm wondering if now is not the right time for you to serve, right? Like, it could even be as simple as that.
So
Trying to find a way to say we've really decided that the skill sets and the people that we need on the board, we've had more interest than we thought, and what we'd really like to do is ask you to potentially consider serving in another capacity later down the road, but not now. So, sort of softening the blow. I'm not sure what the relationship is with them, and that would be another question. What is the relationship, and what are the possible consequences of that, real and imagined, right? So that's
right.
the importance of writing it out and thinking it through, and getting to a point where you've processed it enough that you're clear about, here's the action I'm going to take.
Yeah. Should we even step back and say, so we know that this person, because we have evidence that tends to fight with people online, do we know that that person will behave that way with this board? Is that a risk we're willing to take? And what I think I'm hearing from you, Whitney, and from Anya both is it seems like that's going to be a foregone conclusion. It's going to be a done deal, and we need to get rid of that person. Mm-hmm. Is there anything that we should do in giving that person the benefit of the doubt?
Well, the freshness, the newness of this organization and this board, it's a vulnerable time for the organization. And if your gut feeling is that this person is going to create a distracting dynamic as a result of some of the things that you've seen and done, my coach would tell you, hire slow and fire fast.
Oh yeah, completely agree.
And it's a tough situation, but it's much easier to have a difficult conversation now than to be subjected to a year's worth of board meetings and having to kind of endure that. So, but I do think that there are some questions to ask. The relationship has a lot to do with how you might approach it, and that's what I just don't know. So depending on their relationship, how many times they're going to have to interact on a regular basis, like how she handles it would probably be dictated by the relationship too. If that makes sense.
Yeah. I think boards are tricky business. I think your comment, Whitney, of hiring slow and firing fast also applies to boards. That I think too many people make the mistake of warm body syndrome. They're like, oh my gosh, we got to have 3 people. Who can I get? I'll get my neighbor Joe. I'll get my cousin Sally, just to get people on the board. And what's better is if you can take your time and interview someone as if you were hiring them for a job.
Yep. Yeah. No eye contact recruiting, And I actually just put myself through that process with a local group here. I have been doing consulting and coaching for so long. It's been a while since I've actually been a member of a board. And so I decided it was time for me to re-enter the playground in that space, not as the leader, but as a contributing member, to really get a sense of how to deal with things from the inside, not as the leader, right? And they have a process. I'm real impressed. I had to fill out an application. I have to wait to hear back from them to see if they want to discuss joining their board further. I had to give some thought to their mission and to what they were doing in the world and why I'm aligned with that, what skills I bring to the table. It was pretty cool to even go through that process. Gave me a little more sense of, I'm glad they're being choosy. I'm likely to have a good experience on this board. It's the only board I've ever served on or been a leader of that has asked me to do that process.
That's very cool. I actually have used a similar process several times, and it works really well. And I think the biggest thing about it is it gives you time and space to think and to have some meaningful conversation with that board prospect. So I guess the second part of Anya's question was about replacing this person. So getting rid of somebody who is not a good fit on your board that's one thing, and replacing them is another thing. And Anya, if you didn't listen to the webinar that Whitney led, you might want to go back and listen to that, and then I can go pull a couple other things about board recruitment. But basically, if you can follow this sort of idea that Whitney's talking about of an application process, and even back before you do that, thinking about the skills, talents, and connections that you need on your board to get you to the next level of growth for your organization, that can be huge, because you don't need everybody. There are specific skills and connections and energy and thought that you need on that board to help you grow to that next level, and that's what you should be focusing on. Actually, I'm going to be writing an article in the next couple of weeks on building your first board, and I'll address some of that there. So hopefully that's helpful for Anya. Leah, do you have anything you want to chime in on that with?
Yeah, I was just going to say a couple things. So as far as, handling the situation, not many people like confrontation. So of course it's going to be a little bit uncomfortable, but just know that this is about the organization and not this person. So it's not personal.
Right.
It's not personal. It's all about the organization. And so you have to confront this in order to make a business decision. You need them to change a behavior, not because they're a bad person, but because doing so will help the organization and it'll help you serve your clients better. So that's what I would say about, handling that. And then with replacing that person and the board job descriptions, those are super helpful. Mm-hmm. Like Whitney was saying, she went through this whole process. If you put together board job descriptions for these folks and you put that in front of them, it allows you an opportunity to very explicitly list out what the expectations are and their roles on the board and how they should conduct themselves as well. So board job descriptions are a super helpful tool to help lay out those expectations.
And expectations are key, I think.
And even going back, right? I don't know what her time frame is, but even deciding, we've decided that we need a different process for board recruitment, and all of the people who have already expressed an interest, we're going to ask them to go through that same process too, including you. Here's the application and the expectations to open up the opportunity for a deeper conversation about fit and expectations.
That's a really good way to do it, Whitney. And you know what, Anya, you can blame it on us. You can totally say, hey, I joined this program and I learned that we didn't quite do it right to put our first board together. So we're going to back up and do it right.
Yes.
So you can totally blame it on us. And then it's not like you pointing out that this person is a bad fit and the other one is a good fit. It's just saying we want to get the process in place. And that's difficult to argue with.
Yeah.
I like that. I tell people all the time to blame stuff on me. My consultant said that I should do this, that, or the other. I'm like, go ahead, blame it on me. It's all good.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Okay, Anya, if you need more, the Facebook group is open, so jump in there. I want to say hey to Ann and Martha. Looks like they've joined in. Hey, guys, ladies, hope y'all are doing well. Feel free to type your questions in the Q&A box if you've got them. Wanted to go address one that popped up in the Facebook group this week from Sarah Jewell. She was talking about her organization where I think she is not the founder. They've got a founder, and it feels like a little bit of founder syndrome going on there. Whitney, I'm hoping you saw this one. If not, you may want to go read it. Basically, what they're trying to do is transition some of the fundraising and some of the relationships away from the founder to some of the other staff, and having a difficult time doing that. And I think that is, if you take a step back, that is a symptom of growth of the organization, and it's showing up in that the donors feel very connected to the founder, and they're giving because of that relationship. And I think what we want to do is get them very focused on the mission and the outcomes the organization is achieving, so that they'll give because of the outcome and not because it's the founder who's asking them to give, or it's a different person who's asking them to give. And Sarah had some really good thoughts about fixes that she was considering, and I think those are good. But I think it's a symptom of a little bit bigger issue. Would love to know what the both of you think about this, if you had a chance to read it.
I am going to find it right now. I'm trying to, things are moving slow without power here.
Oh, bless you. Yeah, if you
I didn't have a chance to read it. Go ahead.
You won't have to scroll down very far.
I didn't have a chance to read it, but at face value, I'm sitting here thinking, number one, I'm curious if there's I like to keep things very foundational. So is there an org chart? Are there job descriptions? Here we go with the descriptions thing again for these staff. And so it's important for these leaders to get on the same page of what the duties are of these staff people. Right. And so if you're bringing in the staff to relieve the workload of the leaders, then that needs to be, again, listed out, and that's what it is. That's what that person needs to be doing. And that's something, that list of activities is, the founder needs to be on board with that. And so they have to just be willing to give that up. What's the point in having staff if they're not going to carry out the duties of what the leaders need you to do?
And the leader can maintain communication and connection with those people, because I'm also seeing that as a primary issue here, but through communication, not the actual execution or request of the fundraising, right? So transferring this whole thing to a without losing the personal touch is really, it's about declaring it and communicating it from an excitement standpoint.
Yes.
We're growing. We're expanding. We are extending the opportunity. And so what you might do is go back to those people who have traditionally given and call them the founding circle or something, right? Like, give them an opportunity to be the first to hear about how things are changing, so that they're warmed up to the idea, and that they are going to be this special group of founding donors that have really helped this thing get off to an amazing start. And now you're starting this next level, what was grassroots. Now you're starting a more strategic campaign to be able to expand the capacity of the organization and the great work we do, which we would not have been able to do had you not been who you were in the beginning. Thank you, right? Like, just this allowing the leader to stay in communication with the folks, but then also introducing the staff or introducing the process for donations moving forward. And it could be that the founding person needs to grab that founding circle and be a little bit more connected to them. But then the next layer of people who are coming in can then be more fully managed by the staff and team, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think that makes a lot of good sense. And you're right.
I'm always
the communication,
a big fan of communicating from a celebration standpoint, not we know you're used to dealing with so-and-so, but that's not going to happen anymore. Like, the celebration part is, it's time to take this next level.
I like that. I think that could work for a lot of people, for a lot of situations, of communicating from an excitement standpoint instead of a dread or a pressure or any kind of a negative standpoint.
We're sorry. Yeah. I had a mentor once tell me, never say I'm sorry, always say thank you. And I believe that in nonprofit communication, that's probably one of my biggest pet peeves, is there's a lot of I'm sorry. instead of thank you. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to make this right. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to hear your experience as a donor, as a volunteer, thank you for bringing this to our attention. Thank you for your perspective. Instead of, I'm sorry you had that experience. So just really, leveraging language as a way to deal with your own mindset as well as the mindset of the people you're communicating with.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. And it's an exciting problem to have when you're growing and you need to have other people actually doing the execution of some of the fundraising. And it is totally possible to have the communications come from the head person. Even if your founder / executive director doesn't want to actually write the emails, they can still help shape them and strategize the message. Somebody else can write it, and then that person signs off on it. So the message still comes from that person. It's just not, they're not having to physically sit down and write it and shoot out the email or the newsletter or whatever. So a lot of different ways to accomplish it and make it happen. And Whitney, I love it when you're here because it always makes me think, like, ask more questions.
Yes, always ask more questions.
What are some different ways that we could get this done? What's another way to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish? Why do we think that there's only this one way and it can't be done? And
what else could be true?
Yeah,
that's another one of my favorite ones. What else could be true?
Yeah. Very good. All right, so hang on just a second. Let me go back and see. Looks like some other folks have joined us. Welcome. If you've got questions, the Q&A box is there. Oh, good. Looks like Ann and Martha both showing up. Gold stars to you both for your questions. All right, so Ann says, how can I reopen a conversation with a lapsed donor who may have fallen off due to my lack of communication before I knew what I know now about staying in touch with donors? Awesome. So good idea to reopen communication. What I find is the best thing is just to acknowledge. So you could totally call this person and say, hey, I realize it's been a while since I've reached out to you, and I just thought it was time for me to pick up the phone and call and say, thank you for your past support, and how are you doing? You might just check in with that person. What's up in your world? How are you doing? Can I give you a quick update about what's happening at the nonprofit? I think that's usually a good thing to do, is just acknowledge that, yeah, it's been a while. And that's why I've decided today that I would pick up the phone and just call you. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I agree. Just the longer you let it linger, the harder it gets. So you just make a decision to do that, express interest in them. Don't ask them for money during that phone conversation, right? It's really about just maintaining contact, send some kind of nice follow-up. Great to talk to you. You'll be hearing from me again soon. I promise not to be a stranger. Some way of just really establishing that connection and sharing exciting news and finding out what's new and good with them. And I think that's an excellent idea, but not to put it off and to make it personal.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't have said it any better. Thank you, Whitney.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Great time. Thinking alike.
The other thing you can do in a situation like that is, depending on what you know about that donor, let's say you know that donor is all about one of the kids programs that you have, then part of that call to reach out to them is to tell them, I just wanted to give you an update and bring you back into the loop about what's going on with that program.
Yeah, that's great too.
Yeah, so if you know what they're interested in, all the better, because then you can loop them in. You can share a couple of nuggets or a story, or even say something like, "I knew you'd want to know about this," and so that's part of why I'm calling today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. I knew you'd want to know this. I knew this would make your day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you don't know anything about them or about what their interests are, then you could share something like, This just melted my heart, and I thought that you would appreciate it too. And then tell the story,
Mhm.
tell the update, something like that. So basically, what you want to do is go sit on the couch with them. Don't
Mhm.
sit at the boardroom table where you're on one side and they're on the other. Go sit on the couch with them. Like, think about
Mhm.
how you would with an old friend. You'd sit down together with a cup of tea and say, "Oh my gosh, let's catch up. What's been happening in your world?"
Mhm.
Kind of get on the same side with them, and I think that's a really good way to do it. And yay,
And
Anne.
another good way to say that is, what are you celebrating? What are you happy about right now? And that leads you right into, here's what we're celebrating.
Yep, that's good. That's good. And yay for Anne that now she knows she has to do a better job of staying in touch with donors.
Yay.
Wahaha! It's awesome. Yeah, it's amazing how once you get the hang of the warm touches, once you get the hang of staying in touch with people, it's really not a big deal, but boy, it means a lot. It means a lot.
Mhm.
Martha has a question. Martha's asking, do you have a template for developing a board application and or writing board job descriptions?
Mm.
I bet that I do. So I can get you a template for both of those. And then
Board
Whitney, do you
Source is
have,
also a really good
yes,
place to find stuff.
board
So
source.
boardsource.org.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, they're a great resource.
I think they actually have a board member job description template that you can download off their website.
Yep. Yep. And I'm really sure if you go Google nonprofit board job description, you'll probably find a lot, and then you can kind of pick and choose what you like. I can download a couple as well. I can post a couple in the Facebook group.
Of course, you want to have board member job descriptions, but then you also want to have, so like for your president, your president job description, or your treasurer job description, secretary job description.
I'm gonna laugh because I'm on a board right now that if I had a job description for what I'm doing, boy, I'd be talking to somebody. Because I'm really sure I'm doing stuff that's not on the job description.
That's that line that says, and all other duties as outlined by the organization.
Yeah,
Right.
other duties as assigned. I'm sure that's what that is. And sometimes in a small nonprofit, you just have to do whatever it takes to get the job done, right?
Definitely.
Oh my gosh. All right. Other questions? Let me go check back in a couple of places. I'll check my email real quick. Okay, while I'm doing that, and just to see if there's anything else out there, do either of you have specific tips that you want to share for commonly asked questions? I know you guys both have some real specific areas of things that you cover. If you have tips on commonly asked questions, things that people ask you a lot. I know I get asked a lot. Are there lists of donors out there that we can just go get? That always makes me laugh. The answer is no. There's not a master list of donors out there that you can go get and magically get money from. It doesn't work that way. You have to build your own tribe. You have to go build your own base of support of people who already love what you're doing. They just don't necessarily know about you yet. There are definitely ways to find those people out in the community. One of the webinars that we did early this year was about building your big loyal donor base, and I talked about how to create an ideal donor profile so that you can go find those people who are most likely to care about what you're doing. But that one always gets me. That always makes me laugh. Where's the list of donors? Can't we just get that? No. the other one that makes me laugh a lot, and especially this time of year because it's event season, a lot of people doing events, and they'll say, "Oh, we'll just go get the list from the Chamber of Commerce, and we'll mail all the businesses a letter, and we'll get sponsors that way." Don't
Yeah,
bother.
it's relationships, 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 relationships.
Yep. I have seen one time, probably 1 in a million, that somebody got a really nice sponsorship from a cold call. And I think it was a total fluke. But most of the time it doesn't work. You have to have somebody on the inside. And by the way, events have their place, and they can not only raise money, they can bring a lot of new donors to the table, they can raise a lot of awareness, create some really positive buzz in the community. But for most events, you're going to make your money on your sponsorships, and you need to plan that out ahead of time of how you're going to approach businesses and what you're going to ask them to sponsor and how much and all that. And you got to start that stuff really, really early. We just had our Horse Haven event, not this past Saturday, but the Saturday before that, so just like a week ago or so. The committee normally takes the summer off, and then they will start in September revising any of the materials. And by late September, they will be out asking for sponsorships for the next event, which will be in May of 2019. That's probably a good 8 or 9 months out, and that's about what you need to do. You need to be plenty early, because I guarantee you there will be some businesses that you're thinking about approaching that are setting their budget for 2019 in September. They're creating that and making those decisions in the fall, so you need to get in front of them in the fall.
Mm-hmm.
What common questions do you two get asked that you might be able to give a tip about?
Leah, do you want to go first, or?
Sure, yeah. So let's see, in the grant world of things, one of the questions for newer and younger nonprofits or those who have never written before is always, what do I need to put into a grant? How do you write a grant? What goes into it? And so, although there are different types of grant applications, and there's different, proposals and letters of inquiries and 50 million different ways of doing it, there's a main theme that runs throughout grants. And so generally, you're going to have 7, 8 different sections. And those sections tend to be like a summary or an abstract of what it is you're proposing to do with their money. And the need statement. So what is the need that you're addressing? Is it homelessness? Is it animal welfare, euthanasia, overpopulation? What is the need that you're addressing? And so within that need, you need to be sure to use statistics that support your case. The next section is your goals and your objectives. So what is it that you are proposing to do with the money that you get? What is your methodology? What activities, what plans are you going to have with your activities? So what do those look like, and what's the timeline behind those? How long is it going to take you to do each of these items, or whether it's we're project ready, we can go now, or in the first 3 months we can do this, in the next 3 months we can do this. So some sort of timeline that helps them understand how long it'll take you to complete what it is that you're proposing. And then measurables. So what are the outcomes of what you're proposing? So how many people are you serving? How many animals are going to be adopted? Just any type of metric that you can throw out there to them. So short-term outcomes, anything like that. And then, of course, any type of evaluation plan that you have. So you can tell the funder, this is what we're proposing to do. This is how we're going to do it. This is when we're going to do it by. These are expected results. But then as a result of all of this, we're going to evaluate what we've done, let's say in a year, and decide what programmatic changes we need to make. So maybe it didn't quite work out the way we wanted to, so we're going to adjust it this way or this way. And then, or maybe it worked out really well and you want to expand and grow the program. Either way, you just need to let them know that you will evaluate what it is that you've done and that you'll share with them. Of course, funders are interested in sustainability. So if this is a program that you're asking for money, what financial sustainability do you have? So what is your fundraising plan to keep this going? How programmatically, how will you continue to keep this growing? You know, if this was the first year of the program, this was your pilot year of this program, and it was successful, how are you going to market it and lift it off the ground for the second year? And then finally, you have the budget. So you're always going to have a grant budget. So again, parts that go into writing a grant typically are your summary, your need statement, goals and objectives, activities, timelines, an evaluation plan, sustainability, outcomes, and your budgets.
You know, one of the things that I remember a lot of people asking about grants is, or trying to do, is just taking one sort of generic proposal and sending it to as many foundations as they can. And that doesn't work.
No, it doesn't.
You want to talk about why that doesn't work?
Yeah. Most funders are going to have some type of process for you to follow. So it might be they want you to submit a letter of inquiry. Some may want you to do an application online. Some may want you to do like a full-blown proposal, so like 5-6 pages. And so you want to make sure that you're tailoring your responses to what it is that the foundation supports, because each of these foundations, they have their own goals, they have their own missions. You know, they don't exist just to give nonprofits money. They exist to help support social change. And so as much as you need them, they need you as well. So you want to make sure that you're tailoring your responses to show them that their investment will make a difference. And so if you just willy-nilly send stuff out and it's generic, they're going to feel that generic. They're going to feel kind of the coldness behind that. And they're going to know that you just did that you just made carbon copies and spit it out to everybody. So you want to make it, you want to personalize it for them and customize it to what it is that you want them to invest in. It's all about sales. You've got to sell your organization to them. And in order to do that, you have to find that common connection and you have to establish that relationship via paper or telephone call or whichever.
Cool. Yeah, it's all about, as Whitney said earlier, relationship, even with foundations, even in trying to understand what they're most interested in and the social change they want to make, as Leah mentioned, and making sure that the program that you want them to invest in is going to be a match. It's going to be a good fit, because that's when you can start to see some really good things happen. And frankly, that's when you're going to get the yes, we're going to award you a grant letter. That's an exciting thing. All right, let's see. Other tips, common issues, lots of other tips.
Yeah.
What do you got, Whitney?
So I don't have time to keep following up with all of my board members about the stuff that they have to do, right? Like, so these are executive directors typically that I'm dealing with. And what I really like to recommend to them is to step back from that belief for just a moment and we get curious. So here I go again with the questions, right? So, but I invite them to step back and say, all right, let's talk a little bit about your process. How are you set up? How often does your board meet? Like, there's this whole series of getting really clear about what is the general flow of communication and meetings and expectations, and kind of just get clear about that. Usually at that point, I can see some opportunities that they also see opportunities because they finally risen above the process and taken a look at it. Maybe for the first time in a while, right? Because they're reacting and responding. They're in the mix. They're answering emails. They're dealing with all kinds of questions from board members and from the community. And so they're constantly in the mix. And it's not often that they take the 15 minutes or so that it might take for us to rise above all of that and just take a look at the big picture and say, where can we make some improvements so that they're more clear about what they have to do, and you're more clear about when you allocate time to check in with board members, and if you are not the one to do it, who is? And so we get a lot of clarity by just rising above the initial frustration and getting clear about what is the system. I have a great quote that I like to use. Your system is perfectly designed to give you the results that you're getting. It's infuriating in its truth. So we just get clear kind of about the system. So that's one thing. The second thing is to check in against your assumptions. So what assumptions are you making about the amount of time that you're spending following up with board members? It may not be as much as you think, right? It may feel constant, but it may actually really only represent about 20 minutes a week. And so is there a different way that you can frame that or set that up so that it feels less constant and more like it really is, which is, a few minutes, a few times a week. There's a big gap with executive directors and board members in general about how much time it actually takes to do things, how much time they're spending doing things. It's such rich soil for clarity. And so we work in kind of tracking time and allocating blocks of time and being deliberate about those blocks of time. And then people see the difference in the gap between reality and perception. So that's often like a sigh of relief. Like the first one is, oh, our system needs a little tweaking. Okay, we can do that. Second, oh, I'm not spending as much time as I think I am, or I'm spending way more time than I thought I was, and I could probably tighten this up. And then the third thing is to just be clear, be decisive, and be deliberate. Like, are you being clear about when you need the information? Are you being deliberate about when you're in communication so that they don't feel like they have to reach out to you constantly because they know you have a regular conversation, twice a month, or that you have a process or a system for responding to some of that stuff. So those are my kind of big wins with people in a very short period of time, or even with a board group. That might be an activity that I do, and get them to say, how much time do you really think you're spending, working on stuff? And laughing out loud when they're, like doing their math. There's some people who want to hang on to the perception that they're working a lot. But when if people are really being truthful about it, they're not spending as much time as they think they are. So it's doing the things that they are doing.
Really more of an excuse than anything then, yeah? Do you think if they're doing that, if they're saying, I'm spending so much time, really that's an excuse to not have to look closer at the communication with people or whatever the task is?
Yeah. And it's common, right? Like, it's really, nobody will argue much with somebody who says, oh my God, I'm so busy, and everybody's like, oh, I totally commiserate, instead of, are you really? That's not very conversational. That doesn't make you popular at parties, or at board meetings. But you can pose a question. I'm curious. I'd love to just have a conversation about how much time we feel like we're spending doing this work, and I want to maybe issue a little challenge. What if between now and the next board meeting, we commit to only doing 5 hours? What could we get done in that 5 hours if we were being very deliberate about it? And the first person to get to 5 hours, raise your hand, right? Like, there's so many different ways of approaching this with a playful, competitive, curious nature to get people really seeing that they're not doing as much as they think they're doing, or they're spending way too much time doing things that don't have to take that long. Does that make sense? Or that just don't have any impact. Right? Like, I'm constantly thinking about this, but I'm not taking any action. That's not helpful for either the board or that person.
Yeah.
It's just busting through some of the mindset stuff, some of the thoughts, beliefs, and attitudes, and there are ways to do that honor our tendency to think that we are, that we are overworked, overwhelmed, and nobody can do it but us.
Oh, I wouldn't be guilty of that. I don't think anybody else would either, right?
Right? I preach what I need to hear every day, right? Like I teach myself. I actually had a client, an executive director of a local CASA program, invited me to coffee, and he said, I wanted to talk with you a little bit about your mindset stuff, and I just want to ask you a really personal question, and I hope you don't mind. And I'm like, oh my God, okay, go for it. And and he said, how much of this work do you actually do for yourself? And I said, I'm in the work every day, 3 or 4 times a day. I'm adjusting my own mindset, or I'm writing through something, or I'm reading something that lifts me up. And I pulled this bag of index cards out of my purse, the bound index cards. And I said, and this is my little attitude adjuster. I said, these are the little quotes and affirmations and sayings and things that sort of help shift my mood. And I carry them with me all the time. So I do this work constantly. I don't just teach it, I live it. It's a regular work. And he said, I really sensed that about you, and I like that about you. And that was such a compliment to not feel like I'm going into these board meetings and asking people to do anything that I'm not doing on my own all the time.
Oh yeah.
Right? Like it takes work. It takes effort.
Yeah, I'm sure that there's a lot of folks who think, oh man, this nonprofit stuff, it's going to be so easy, or, oh, leadership, it'll be easy. No.
Yeah, or everybody's just going to do what I ask them to do.
The first time, yeah.
And a lot of times the onus of how we express our expectations and the systems and processes we have in place don't support the expectation that that person's going to be able to take it and run with it. So what do we need to own as leaders, and what kind of a culture do we need to create so that there's a feedback loop and an openness to change?
Yeah. Well, and I think that's it really, is people being willing to try something different, people being willing to see that there's a different way than whatever they've got set in their head about how things are going to roll.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. All right. We are just about out of time. Any last thoughts from either of you, or any last questions from anybody who's listening? I'm going to go back through one more time and just check and make sure I didn't miss anything. It doesn't look like I did. Okay, so those of you who are listening to the recording, well, actually, and those of you who are here, if you do think of something else, you kind of pondering on maybe something that one of us said today, you are always welcome to go post in the Facebook group and tag one of us. Whitney is very open to that. Leah's very open. Leah actually shares a lot of stuff in there. We're happy to come along and answer questions for you anytime. So please feel free to do that. And let me see if I can find the schedule. I can tell you we have a training webinar next week. So it'll be next Thursday. That's June the 7th. How is it June already? Good gracious.
Oh my God.
I know, right? So next week on the 7th, I'll be leading the webinar, and I'm going to be talking about how to create a power talk that moves people to action. So when you get those speaking gigs with the Rotary Club and the Garden Club, or wherever you're going out to speak, what do you say? What order do you say things? How do you walk away with donations and new volunteers and new opportunities? I'm going to teach you that next week. So watch your inbox. We'll be sending you email with all the login information. And we appreciate you being here with us today.
There.
Are you going to be there?
I'll be there. That sounds like something I could learn from. Yeah, that sounds
great. It's some cool stuff. I got some good handouts. You're welcome. Come join us.
Love it. Love it. Thank you, Sandy, for what you're doing to elevate and increase the capacity of these amazing nonprofit leaders across the world. And just amazing. And Leah, thank you for doing the thing that I could never do, which was write those damn grants by myself. So thank you for Thank you for what you do too. I love and appreciate you both for who you are in the work and in the world. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's
And back at you, sister. We appreciate you, Whitney,
All
always
right.
showing up and reminding us to ask questions and think about it from a different point of view. All right.
Yeah. Great.
I believe that is it for today. Thanks, everybody. We will see you all again next time. Bye now.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.